So, Mariana, why did you feel the need to do this research?
I felt that we currently have a limited view of the role of the state in the economy. So we basically have the Keynesian view, which is about demand stimulus, when you don't have enough GDP if you want, when there's not enough growth, what the state can do. We have a Schumpeterian view, which is basically about creating the conditions for innovation to happen. What we don't have within economics, and hence with policymakers, is a view of the state really leading, making those investments in a very early stage, taking on uncertainty when the private sector is too scared to. This book is not about Keynes, because there's plenty of books on Keynesian economics, and there's plenty of people in government currently making that case of why we should be spending now as opposed to cutting now. What this is doing, if you want, is also complementing that view and saying what kind of spending should we be doing now. And in fact, the Green New Deal, if you want, that Obama is engaging with, is in fact one potential application of what I'm saying.
The government uses the limited resources it has available in a way that is designed to spur future growth.
Absolutely.
That's a far more effective.
Absolutely. And not only is it very effective, but the private sector tends not to do it. So the private sector is in fact, and we have seen this in the evolution of almost every technology, is in fact quite fearful of this very early stage. And this is why we tend to see venture capital coming in, as it did in biotechnology, 20 years later than the government did in terms of major funding. In fact, in the past, the state has also played an absolutely central role to commercialization. So for example, the Small Business Innovation Research Program in the US, SBIR, which in the UK has been copied as the SBRI program, has been responsible for funding Apple, Compaq, Intel. So this is part of the commercialization process. So again, this is about funding the early stage, uncertain phase of a technology's development, but also early stage of firms' development. And that really is, again, the commercialization phase.
So what you're saying is that taxpayers' money should be used to give the private sector the space to go and create wealth because they won't do it for themselves. Is that fair? That seems like taxpayers' money going for shareholder reward. Is there a way to make it more equitable?
There is, absolutely. First of all, there's examples around the world that are quite unknown, which if they were better known, I think people would start debating these issues more. For example, in Finland, Sitra, which is more or less equivalent of MIT in Japan, sort of the industrial policy unit of the Finnish government. They were the early investors in Nokia. And when Nokia made mega bucks, Sitra in fact earned back a return. That didn't happen, for example, in the US when Google, again, something people don't know, when the algorithm for Google was funded by the US government, as it was through the National Science Foundation, when Google later made billions, nothing came back to the government.
So the state is doing some of the risk and it should get some of the reward.
Absolutely, and so really one of the core, I hope, outputs of the pamphlet is to help people better understand what I call the risk-reward nexus. So to start understanding the state as one of the main risk-taking agents, and as such, they should, like shareholders, get back some of the return from that risk-taking.
So what should the government do, therefore?
The government should be taking on that risk, and it should also try to think and brainstorm about the different institutional and policy setups that it might institute in order also to get back some of the return. Why should it get back the return? Not only because that would be fair, but also in order to make sure that there's going to be a cycle of investment. Otherwise, you get the situation that you have in the US, where the US government has made these massive investments in these new technologies, from the internet, again, green technology today, the biotech industry, pharmaceutical industry, of which most of the new drugs were invented in national laboratories, and then having something like the Tea Party come in and try to, if you want, withdraw the state. And this is really because you have no public understanding about the state's crucial role there. So it's also a question of changing behaviors, changing image, changing public perception of what the state has done.